All right. Hey, quants, we're going to go ahead and get into what I had been talking about on the last video. I will just start off by saying the charts look pretty good right now after I believe the Strait of Hormuz was announced as being opened, and that was agreed to by the supreme leader of Iran, and along with some negotiations that I believe occurred. So anyways, we're not going to talk about the markets too much today other than building indicators. So I did mention that I was going to get into building a grid bot indicator. So first of all, if you don't know what a grid bot indicator is, well, let me start off with a little bit of preface before that about the recording. Since this is the first time I'm recording a video like this, I'm going to likely slow my speech down a little bit. Hopefully I won't have too much dead space, but I'm just going to build this indicator on stream. Well, it's not a long, it's just a recording. It's not actually a live stream, but I would be interested in doing that in the future if anybody's interested in just getting on a, having like a live stream session where I'm just doing kind of a chill coding session. People could potentially ask questions or jump in, and maybe we can just build something together. That might be kind of a fun thing to do. But for this one, I just want to kind of lay the groundwork that this is just going to be low-key, chill coding session. I hope at the end of this we'll have something that's functional. It's a fairly simple indicator, and so I expect that will be the case. But since this is a live first-time thing, and I didn't pre-plan this indicator out, I'm not sure what the end result is ultimately going to be. So with that said, let's get into building a grid bot. So if you don't know what a grid bot is, a grid bot is typically a strategy. It can be a strategy, a strategy indicator, whatever. It's a method, and in terms of execution, it would be a strategy in terms of how you're going to set your buy and sell signals. So let's see if I can zoom in on the chart a little bit. Why is that not sticking? It's because we have the sidebar over here, and it's not going to be, and that's okay. I've heard some people complaining about not liking the sidebar over here. I do like it, but it's hiding some of the charts. So my ability to zoom in here right now is not going to be that great. With that said, going back to what the grid bot is, so grid bot strategy is basically going to have a certain number of lines, and when you drop down to the lower lines in the grid, you're going to initiate buy signals, and when you drop down or raise up into the upper lines, you're going to initiate sell signals. Obviously, that's in the context of a long strategy. If you're going to do a short grid strategy, then you would do the opposite, where you're going to sell as you raise price moves up into the upper areas of the grid, and then you're going to buy. You're going to close your short when you get back into the lower bounds of the grid. So with this particular strategy, is it even working? I've got the wrong one selected, so I did preload the skeleton key on here just in case we can actually get to a point where we'll be able to test this. And so with this particular strategy, we had, what was the grids? So we had 15 grids. I'm just going to count those out because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so yeah, when I said 15, I was like, that's uneven, which is fine. But I just wanted to count because it's been a long time since I've looked at this. I did find this. Somebody had presented something similar to this on YouTube. And in particular, what I liked about it was that this one was using a moving average. And so going back to what a grid strategy, the overall idea of a grid strategy, in most cases, what you're probably going to find if you're using 3 commas or something like that, where they have them built in, you're just going to pick horizontal levels. And so that would look like a very flat grid. As price moves up, you sell or buy. As price moves down, you sell or buy. And it's just going to execute at those levels. The challenge, and that is perfect in a ranging market. That is it. in my opinion, and I've worked with some wealth managers or spoke with some wealth managers that have talked about their experience with investing and trading. And in their opinion, one of the things that they mentioned was that the grid strategy was the only strategy that they considered viable. A lot of people have a lot of different opinions about their own experiences that they'll codify as fact. And so, I've been running successful algorithmic strategies for a couple of years now. And so I haven't been as successful as a lot of other people doing that, but I have seen some success. And so I'm not blind, or I don't agree with the common statement that it's impossible to build an algorithmic strategy that works, which I've heard some people say. And so I'm also not opposed to using discretionary strategies, just because I like the idea of doing algorithmic trading, because it allows you to execute trades when you're not sitting at the computer and that. But all that said, in the context of a grid strategy, in a sideways market, when you have a fixed grid, it can be a very good way to play the market. The difficult part in that context is determining when you're going to be in a range and when you would be able to start that grid strategy. So this particular idea, the individual who had presented it used an MA as the baseline for the grid. Excuse me. All right, so the idea of using an MA, I thought was a pretty. It probably wasn't he's probably not the first person to come up with this, first of all. But the reason I liked the idea about it is that it didn't lock you into a fixed grid that you'd have to first identify where price was going to be in the future. Well, not in the future, where it is currently, but you'd have to figure out when you're going to turn it off or turn it on. Because as an example, if you, where we're looking here, the price looks pretty flat, right? So if we just bend our imagination a little bit here and imagine that these lines were all flat, if price started to drop down like it did here, and you got all these buys, great, and then it started to move up and trigger your sells, then you're going to ultimately start selling out of these positions. And eventually, if it was a breakout move, if this was fixed, you would break out of that grid and you would have zero position. Now, if your goal is trading and you were working on a trading account that was allocated specifically for a non-trending market, and then you didn't have a position when it was a breakout trade, that's probably fine, because you might have a completely different strategy for breakout trades, or going long for using something like the master strategy that I've been going over and over again. Typically how I do my analysis on the charts. Then you might have something like that actually get you in a move, and you might have a different account for that, or you might just take your capital that you'd been using for your grid strategy and just move it over to trend following strategy at that point. So that is one of the risks that you run with a grid strategy, though. You can have no position on the other side, and this might be a little bit more painful depending on where you're at. And so obviously if you're going long and you break out to the upside and you just don't have a position, you're not losing money. However, if that were to go to the downside and you bought all the way down here, and then it breaks to the downside, now you're just holding these positions for some undetermined amount of time. And so it is common in the grid strategies to also have some kind of like ultimate stop loss down here, where you're just going to sell out all your positions. And so the idea there obviously being that you're not going to continue to ride this down forever. You're just going to play the range, and then when the range breaks to the downside at some point, you're just going to cut your losses and assume, or at that point you might want to reevaluate the market, because it might be in a trending market even if the trend is down. So those are some of the concerns and issues that I had with just like a completely flat grid, right? And why I really like the idea of using an MA indicator for a grid bot, because now what you can do is you can take your MA line and position it wherever you want, so that it on average follows price, and then define a grid using some value. In this case, it's using standard deviations. So if depending on how many standard deviations above or below that, you would execute your buys and sell signals off of. So it's kind of a somewhat of a self-healing grid strategy in that case, because that doesn't mean just because you're doing this doesn't mean you can't break out of the top here. You absolutely can. However, it's very likely that and probably at some point the price, so I'm just going to move this around here so we can see it a little bit. At some point the price is going to come back to your moving average. And the way this particular grid strategy has been built with the inputs that were there, and I think I might have changed this around some, because I know when I first did this one, I noticed that it had there were some issues with it, and it still has some issues. It has issues with position. For one, I know that and so that was one of the reasons I was like, well, I have the skeleton key, built that out a long time ago. And when I initially built it, it didn't have the ability to support a grid type of strategy. I believe it does now, and I say I believe. You would assume that I know, but I write a lot of code, and I don't remember all the code in my head that I've written. And so unless I'm looking at something recently at least, or working on a particular project, some of the aspects of that I will forget. And so that also is another risk of doing what I'm doing right now, which is I could get this built and then I could plug it in the skeleton key and then realize, oh, it doesn't work. However, if that happens, I will do another video where I just do a simple strategy that we can plug this into, similar to like the skeleton key or the skeleton key light. This would be much more like skeleton key light, which is free, by the way. And you just be able to plug this in there and then run that strategy. And so with all that said, the final thing I wanted to kind of mention about this, just tracking price and coming back to price. I mean, you can just see here, if I would have had defined a range, let's use some of these tools that I almost never use. So let's grab a rectangle here. So if I would have drawn, why did I not have focus? Anyway, if I would have, I don't want my box that big. I hope some of you get a laugh out of that. So if you had defined your grid here, assuming, okay, we're going to start ranging. Obviously, I wouldn't have guessed that with this particular picture, but just assuming that's what you would have done, you would have broken up out to the top side, and then you would have been missing out on all this other price action that continued to go. And you would have had to take this grid, and you would have had to move it up, right, as things go. And so that's, again, one of the benefits of using something like a moving average. And so this grid follows the moving average with price, and it just stays in there the whole time. So you just keep executing price the whole time, right? And so, all right, I think we have the ideas behind this, and I believe I've kind of explained that to death. So let's go ahead and get into some of the code. As far as the code, the way that I've set this up right now, just give me 1 second here. Have a little bit of a hiccup. I don't want to hiccup in the camera or in the microphone, so just move that out of the way. So what I did was I just copied the strategy, and then it says cannot use strategy. Yeah, I can't use strategy functions, and I saved it. I thought I commented out all the strategy function stuff here, but clearly I did not. And so with that said, that's where the starting place is the code that I originally created for the grid bot strategy. And so I just copy that over, and now we're going to run with building this out. So real quick, I need to get a little bit more coffee here. By the way, I know I mentioned this before, but I made another one of those cold foam coffees. So I'll be taking pauses to take swigs of this stuff, which is amazing. But yeah. I also have some music playing in the background. I don't have it hooked up to the channel here. I could do that. I know how to do that. However, I'm sure if I did that, there would be, not that I'm monetized anyways, but I would probably get, I don't know if I'd end up getting my content taken down or end up getting a strike because I'm playing some content that I shouldn't. So the P&L table here. So this P&L table, if you've used some of the other stuff, you know what that is, and I'll bring it back later. But right now, this is just a library that I'm going to comment out. I did pull this from an open source one, and I wrapped it up as a library, and I think I added a few more things to it so that I could use it in all of my scripts, besides just using it as like a one-off or copy and pasting it into everything. So, and I do that quite a lot. So P&L table is taken off there. It says I cannot have strategy functions. Oh, P&L table. That, yeah. Well, there you go. This that was. If I would have read that before I started, I might have fixed that. But the P&L table obviously expects it gives you data based on an actual strategy. To be fair, there's really no reason for me to keep this in here now that I'm actually just looking at that, because clearly that is already in the skeleton key, and there's no, when I plug this in as an indicator, there's no reason for me to do that. So the way I want to set this up is I want to set this up so that you would be able to pick any oscillator and then have a standard deviation off of that oscillator to create your grid. So if you don't like the moving average and you're using, you can use a different moving average. So if you don't like the SMA, you can use an MMA or an EMA or any one of those things. But there's a lot of other things that follow price too that you might want to use as a baseline, right? So you might end up using something like that. It might be interesting actually to take something like the Revin Ribbons indicator. I don't know. I know Revin had built some stuff now that's been put out as a strategy that he probably built himself, and then a lot of the stuff that we have there has been stuff that he's built as indicators that I've plugged into strategies to facilitate the strategy implementation and automation aspect of that. But point is, if you wanted to use like the midline of those, because a lot of what he does, some of that where it offsets from there, and so you could use the same midline, but using something completely different logic, build a grid off of that, which would be something similar to like the Revin Ribbons if you've used those. And so if you're curious what all this is, all that kind of stuff is, you can check out the Crown Quant Alchemy site. You're going to be able to see all the products there, and so there'll be a little bit more information about that stuff there if you want to go check out that stuff. I think I should be able to save this now and at least get rid of the errors. So strategy functions, let's see what other strategy functions. Oh, I thought I commented all these out. So this is actually the implementation of the grid. And so, this is basically just saying if it's lower or higher than one or the other, then buy. So we're not going to do that. So that's like your order array. Let's see if we can get this to, I might still implement that the same way, because something else, and again, I mentioned I hadn't looked at this in a long time. So in a typical grid situation, what I would expect is to have all your cells up at this half of the grid and all your buys at this half of the grid. But the way that this is currently implemented is it's going to track these lines. And so you end up getting buys or sells even down in the lower half of the grid. That might be something to play with a little bit later here, because that's probably one of the reasons that this strategy actually works better than just waiting until everything gets up to the top, because you're exiting all your positions here. Because just if you're looking at this midline here as an example, you'll notice that this strategy hardly gets up into the top. And so if you're only waiting to get all the way up here to sell your positions, you could be waiting for a very long time. And so this would be a pretty inactive strategy looking through this, looking through this area. However, I mean, this is I didn't note this before, but one of the reasons that we have this 100, the 100 MA, and I think I implemented it as an MA. One second. Like I said, I hadn't really looked at this much. What do I got here? MA 300 grid lines. I was looking at this and I was thinking, oh, did I do something with the strategy? Oh, these are the, yeah. So these are just, yeah. So these are just for doing Crown Cross stuff. So Crown, he has a couple of MAs that he tends to use. And so I was plugging some of these in as filters, as trend filters. Yeah, so I had applied some trend filter stuff there using that. Oh, that was a long time ago. All right. So, anyways, getting back to it. Where was I at? So, well, I'm just going to keep. I feel like I lost my train of thought there, so I'm going to keep going here. So, we got the MA. Oh, yeah, that's what I was saying. So, 15 minutes here with the 300 MA. And then that's what I was trying to do to see where am I using the MA length here, because that, yeah, so it's an SMA is what there's really not that much code here, and I'm still perusing it slowly. So that's an SMA, not an EMA. Not that it matter that much, but the point is the reason this really long length works to track price closely is because it's on a 15-minute time frame. Obviously, if you're on the daily time frame and you try to throw your 300 MA on there, your grid's gonna be way off most of the time. Unless you have very wide grids. I mean, to be fair, you could still do that and then have like a 15 grid, but make large deviations. This one's using very small standard deviations. So anyway, let's keep going. So group performance table. So none of this stuff is going to actually be in play right now. So right now I'm just cleaning stuff up. The gap fill is to handle times. There's an issue with TradingView, which I don't think has been fixed. I filed a bug for this. They said it was working as designed, but if you read the documentation, the way that I interpret it is not the same way that they say it is implemented. And so the way that this original request security call was implemented, it says that if there's no, I believe what it said is if there was no time frame or no valid signals or values, then they would return NA. And it doesn't return NA, it returns something else. And so I ended up with running into issues with this. And so this is just a fix. So if you're using request security, this is actually not the proper fix anymore. I found some bugs with this and I don't remember what they are off the top of my head, but I'm also not going to worry about fixing those right now. Just a heads up, you can use this. It's a good starter, but there were some issues with this and I had to add a little bit more to it. And then they also have, if you're trying to go on lower time frames as well, there was newer like request low time frame security or something like that. And so then you end up needing to figure out how to use both of these together so that if you're going lower time frames, you're using the proper call. If you're going higher time frames, then you're using the proper call. And so let's see, gap fill. I'm still going to keep this the way it is right now. Uptrend, true. And so with what I was doing here was I was just filtering on uptrend. Here's what I'm thinking, because I know all of this type of stuff is already in the skeleton key. I don't want to overcomplicate this indicator with this kind of stuff. And so like the use trend, like obviously you can do that in the skeleton key and just you can either create your own trend or you can pick the crown trend because that's built into the indicator. But if you have your own trend that you use, just use that and you can plug that in. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to blow this away because I don't need that. So I'm gonna, so for everybody watching, we're gonna eventually get to something where we're building here. So, but I knew this would be a long video anyway. So if you're not interested in watching me clean up this code, I probably should have prefaced this at the very beginning too. Like I didn't know how long it was going to take me to go through this, so I just said chill coding session. That's exactly what it's going to be. So, not rushing here. But obviously, if you just want to see the end result or you want to see the end code being built, skip to the end of the video, closer to the end of the video. All right, so that's all related to that. The trend time frame, we're not doing that. So this is looking better because now we're dealing with just the MA length, which I'm going to change the way that works. We have the standard deviation. So that's what's actually going to create your grid. And then we have the number of grids that we actually want to create. Actually have. And so Let's see. Yeah. So what I like to do, just give me a second here. Man, that is delicious. All right. So what you are, MA, what I like to do with a lot of these type of things is I actually like to use an external source, and then that makes your indicators extendable. If you have something very specific that you're doing, you should obviously just stick with what you have. There's no reason to give options that are just going to confuse users and they just don't even know how to start. So that's one thing. But from an extensibility standpoint, if I want everyone else to be able to plug in a different indicator in here besides the MA that I choose, or if I don't want to have to just only have, even if I only wanted to, well, if I only wanted to be MAs, then I'd probably just do that. But if that's what you wanted, but you didn't want to have to code in the switch for every type of MA, which is really not that big of a deal. But if you wanted to, as an example, then you could give them a source input so that they could reference the external source. From a development standpoint, this tends to be a little bit of a pain in the butt. And the reason I say that is because every time you save this indicator, it's going to blow away any inputs that you have. And so once you put this on your chart and you put in all your input from when you're testing and validating things, which this is one of the things that makes testing the skeleton key such a pain. It uses a lot of external sources, and so, or allows you to use a lot of external sources. And so once you save a change, it's going to blow away all your changes. And then you have to go back and you have to re-enter everything. And so with a small indicator, not really a huge deal. Something like the skeleton key where you can have hundreds of different inputs, it's a huge pain. Especially if you have a super complicated strategy that you want to apply everything to. And so with that, I guess a little commercial break here. I've been working on a little bit of an optimizer. David Tech did one a while ago. And so this is kind of based off of that idea because his doesn't do the things that I want it to do. And also it just doesn't meet my aesthetics. And so I've been working on a revamped version of that, just like on the background with some other stuff on the side of other stuff. And so one of the things that I thought was pretty useful for his stuff, although it might be working better now, I just haven't used it forever, but one of the things that I liked about it was that you could download settings and then upload settings. Again, that could become brittle because then once you change something, all your uploads are like all the previous settings you had saved. Like you can't just upload because it's going to break them. I think there are ways to work around that. And so those are the kind of things that I would probably fix with what I'm working on now. However, anyways, just a commercial, a little bit of a commercial break there. Once I get that out there, maybe I'll make sure that that upload download type of option is working. The reason I'm creating it wasn't related to that at all, but it just made me think about that. So, somewhat of an internal note here. So back to using the external sources inputs and that being a potential pain. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to keep this as a integer value right now. Speaking of which, this is version 5 and I want this to be version 6. That looks like everything updated okay. I might have to change some of the naming on this, but so in order to simplify this a little bit, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it hard coded to this MA value. And then at the very end, I'll probably just make it a external source. And so, I mean, I can just go ahead and put in the code here. And what source length, don't want to call it source length. I'm going to leave it there for right now. And then you would say input source. And then you got to pick some source. So common sources are going to be like your price. And so close is probably one of, if not the most common. And so that would be close. I don't know if there's a way to reference. It has to be a built-in source. So I don't think there's like a built-in MA that you can reference. I wonder if they ever changed that. So, and clearly Could not find function or reference. Spelled that wrong. So let me, there wouldn't be any step here. Oh, that's right. So actually the way, yeah, like I said, been a minute since I've been doing this. So what we would change this to is we're just going to change this to source. And you know, now that I'm thinking about it, I like doing this, and I think I got this from Caretaker. I like some of the ways that Caretaker formats stuff. I don't like the way that he formats everything, but I do like the way that he formats some stuff, and so I took some of that in my own like. Usually usually when you start writing a lot of code, a lot of you might already know this if you're watching this particular video, but you'll develop your own style a little bit. And so with that said, I like to preface all my inputs with this I underscore. Pretty sure I got that from Caretaker. And then similarly, like with functions, I would preface them with F. And then when you're referencing it in your code, it's like if it's F underscore, you know it's a function reference. If it's an I underscore, you know it's an input reference. And it just kind of helps like with finding stuff because the editors here they're not terrible, but I never write code in these myself. So I always write code in an external editor and I copy and paste it over. And part of that is because I like to save my code in Git as well. Even though there's nowhere else I can run my Pine script other than here, I want to have my code so that I can use it for other things, maybe just even like as a knowledge base for AI stuff. If I'm building something else and I was like, hey, I want to build this thing in Python so I can use it in a different Python library. Or, you know, if TradingView blows up or they just decide they hate me and they don't want me to have my scripts anymore and they don't get to just take them away from me, right? So by locking me out of my account. So if you guys are looking at this and you're not doing that, something to think about how you're managing your source control. Oh man, I can't believe the AI stuff is still kind of working for that. All right. So all right. Source close. So what this would so I put close, but ultimately what this is going to end up being when you select it, and we're not using it now, right? But this would be the reference to whatever oscillator you're using that you want to track price to create your grid. And so this is going to be source. I want to give it a better name than that, but I also don't want to spend too much time just on that part. So we're going to say centerline source. There's no steps in there, obviously. And then grid, I've changed the way that I typically name groups. So I like to, I really don't need a group for this, to be honest, but I'll create one anyways, just in case I decide to use it. I can remove it later if I want to. Standard deviation, MA length, source, standard deviation, grid. Because these are all going to be the same thing. You know, I'm just going to drop the groups here because they're not going to be providing any additional value. Moving average conditions. I don't know. Maybe just for the sake of showing people how I like to code a little bit here, I will leave it in here. So we'll say baseline. I'm not really coming up with great names right now, so I don't like these names, but I'll baseline group. Baseline, I think that's okay. So when you create these, what you're going to end up with is, so what I'm creating there is just a variable. And I don't think I need to, like I said, it's been a minute since I've written some Pine script, so they probably have duplicate selection here, and I didn't even do that. So anyways, I'll do it this way, and then that way if I want to change the name of a group, and so this will give you like they're kind of like what do they call it, field set lines around things. So, and then we'll say grid conditions. I'm just gonna grid settings, Grid settings. Yeah, so this was something I got from Caretaker, and I probably don't follow the exact same way he does it, but just kind of it. I think in PineScript, it makes it a lot easier to read it if you have for your inputs. You just align these because they don't have really good formatting, any kind of good, and I haven't found a good way to format. I've seen some plugins for different IDEs and stuff like that, but personally, I think they all suck, so I don't use them. I just manually do things. All right, upper and lower grid deviations. So that's very wordy. Grid deviation. I'm just going to say grid deviations. Grid spacing. Grid lines. That doesn't sound. Number of grid lines. All right. And you'll see how much fun it is to continually keep these things in line, especially when you have a ton of inputs, right? So that's fair. That's fine. If I have a lot of steps and max values, then I'll make sure they're all column aligned. Again, it goes back to the idea of just like trying to make this a little easier to read. So available equity, I don't need this because I'm not dealing with equity here. Label new, bar index high. That was probably related to some debugging related to the equity, and that's one of the things that I found out when I was looking at this, and I was like, this thing is just not tracking position correctly, and so I don't think there's a reason to fix it in here because you have built-in equity management in the strategy if you just use the properties pane. And so I prefer to just use the built-in tools that are provided rather than try to build your own tools. Although there definitely are some gaps with that kind of stuff in TradingView. So. All right. It's going to take me an hour and a half to build this probably 50-line indicator. So I would use this source input for this. Yeah, so here's what I'm going to do. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to reassign. Is that the way that I want to do it? IMA length, MA, choosing the MA length, IMA length. So this piece right here is only going to be used, and I go back and forth because when you're changing things, I prefer camel, the camel case stuff, but I still do the underscore. I think it depends on it. If you came from Python or another language, then you might prefer something else. But for the last, 12, 13 plus years, I've been doing JavaScript. But I grew up on, I grew up in my career on like C. Didn't do a ton of assembly language, but C and C++. And so did a lot of Python, even some building like video games and stuff like that for the iPhone. Doing some of the, what do they do now? Objective-C. So anyways, all the languages kind of have their own flavor of how most people will style it. And so that goes back to like your own style. I haven't found, I don't know. I kind of fell into my own little style for doing stuff with with PineScript. But anyway, let's get back here. So what I was thinking is I'm going to have the input source, and I'm going to use the input source, and I'm going to apply the upper and lower band on the input source. So what I'm thinking about doing here is I don't want to have to rename these a lot when I when I do flip it to use a source here. Did I not? Yeah, those are all lined up. So because right now I said I was going to hard code the MA, which is exactly what I'm doing. And so this particular piece is actually not going to be part of that. So really it doesn't make sense to have. And so this goes back to kind of like what I was saying. I didn't think we needed one here. So I definitely don't think we need one for the This will come down here. This is going to go away. And that's why I'm doing that, because is that true? If you're doing it, if I have an input source and I have the MA, I define the length in the MA. So I could use it here, but well, I feel like I'm just like, I will sit and toil over these things when I'm doing this stuff, but we're not going to do that right now. So what we will do right now is I'm just going to leave it the way it is. I do want this. I'm wondering if it's going to give me crap. I can't remember if it complains about trying to override an input source like this, but the point of me doing this here is that when I decide to only use the input source, then I don't want to have to change the code all throughout. So I'm just going to override that. So I'm using the variable that I want to be using throughout. There's another way that I could do this as well, which is just create the sort, like create a source. And I'll do this sometimes. Like I'll do, if it's in a function, I'll underscore it. And this is kind of like comes from C and C++ days. So really more C++, but so you have like a private variable and you could do that. But in this case, what I would probably do is I'd do source, and then I would set it equal to, in this case, like iSource is what it would be. But for now, what it would ultimately be is this, because that's what I'm using. And so that's what I'm going to use if I can't use iSource throughout. And it depends on, I don't like to have long chains where I jump from variable to variable. And so I try to just use the one variable throughout, which is why I'm just going to use iSource here if I can overwrite it. But if I get caught and run into a problem with that, then you just saw the method I'm going to use to fix that. So upper bound, I don't think the MA was used anywhere else. Let me just do a quick, it doesn't look like it, but probably. So if I save this, it should say fine. And I've got this open in case I catch any errors. And so that looks fine. So upper bound, source, iSource, close. Am I doing that right? Close length. Yeah. So that looks all right. And then 4 grids, we're building it, and I'm just keeping this stuff. I'm not going to replace some stuff if I don't have to, because this is all obviously going to get very long as it is. It creates an order array. So this allocates the memory for it and then doesn't change it. And then this is where the order execution goes. What I'm going to do right now is I haven't actually added this to the chart, but I'm going to hide the stuff that is currently on the chart. And then I'm going to add this indicator to the chart. And because I didn't change the length of the MA, and I'm still referencing the same MA, I expect these grid lines to be the exact same when they get plotted. And so it's really hard to see them on there, but you can see them. And so style, so you can change these plots. I think the reason these are so, I wonder, let me take a look here just to see this, because now I'm in version 6 and this old one was on version 5. And so I wonder if it has to do with the color definitions have changed. There's got to be a better way to write this too. So I might not sit here and trying to figure out how to optimize this, but this is obviously limited. Like, why would this just uses the same thing every time, right? You could just say if it's greater than some number, and you probably, because it's going to be the baseline, right? So you probably want to split this in half and do it that way. So if it's greater than some number, do that. Is it because 70% transparency, so 30% instead of actually 70%? So that might be the difference. But let me just go back here and see. I don't think there's any specific style settings that are on this one. So style, it's just plotting. It doesn't say anything about the color. So yeah, it just has to do with the way the color input's changed. So, I don't like the way that we're doing this, but I'm not going to change it right now. And do I care about... I am going to do a little something here. So another thing that Caretaker does that I like to do is kind of provide comments in terms of the sections. And so you have like a comment, inputs, do your inputs, comment like functionality or something. And so I don't follow the exact same things that I see in almost all of his, I think maybe all of his. And that's why I said that, because I think he's very strict about every single one has always the same thing. And I think I changed the naming on mine a little bit, just because some of the stuff that I use is like calculations, I think, is one of the ones he uses. I don't feel like it. I want to break it out a little bit more when I have a very long script for, I think it, and I don't know. I haven't seen some of his proprietary scripts that are probably really long, but for my own scripts that are very long, it's like just having a big block of calculations. Like I usually have some more tags to help me be able to kind of see where sections are and stuff like that. So writing big Pine script really is not that much fun, in my opinion. It kind of sucks. I'm trying to remember if this is going to be a problem. If I move this to a variable, so what I was just thinking now is, so by specifying these colors individually here in the plot, you get these color inputs, and so you can just control it in here, and that's my preference. I still do this for some usability, and you can have color inputs that are effectively going to be the same exact thing that this does. And so some people just don't come in here and change it, or the way it lays out. Like I might say, change the color here, and then it changes the color for all of these. But when you do that, there's some issues where, I'm trying to remember exactly. I think if you put like a table in there, there's some different types of plots. Once you put them in your Pine script, you're actually going to lose access to being able to adjust the color here. And when you do that, then you kind of have to put them in the input here. So, but again, going back to like using the property panel, my preference is just to use the tools that you're given. As anybody who comes in here who's used Pine scripts, familiar with their scripts, they're going to know where things are, versus like, well, I have to come up with my own way to do this just because I want to. And so I generally try not to do that. Okay, so let's, these are going to be the lower colors. So, what am I writing JavaScript here? Lower color. So there's another thing I saw that I think is a pretty good idea is, so lower. So C lower, this is something, again, like I would see Caretaker do. So he's prefacing the colors with C. I probably would just say color lower. I think that's usually what I end up doing in mine. I'd have to go look at a bunch of my scripts, because I definitely define these in a few places. I normally don't all caps these, but I don't know. I've been doing a lot of JavaScript lately, and so just in general, like some things, when I end up flipping back and forth between different functions or languages, I bring in different biases. So I'm just going to go with this color upper, and I am going to use this. We're just going to go with that for right now. And one thing that I'm going to mention there is, like, it looks like I just did a space, but I actually did a tab. And the reason I did that is for the same reason I mentioned. So now I know that these are all going to align. I don't have to type 4 or 5 spaces. If you have an editor that converts your tabs to spaces, which is usually what I do, then you can, these will still ultimately be spaces versus tabs, but I think they're written as tabs here. I will say, in the age of AI stuff, I don't want to have to copy all these, so here's what I'm going to do for right now. I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to change these colors. And obviously, I'm going super slow at this. If I was iterating fast, I would not be doing all this exactly this way. This is the lower color, right? Yeah, in the age of AI stuff, I've noticed that there are some potential, and this is going to get into, like, people are going to get pissed about, well, you're using tabs versus spaces argument again. I personally am fine using spaces. That's usually what I use, but I wanted it from here. But I spun up a couple of projects recently, and I noticed that they just use tab for everything. And I think the argument was, because I was asking the AI, I was like, why'd you do that? It's like, doesn't follow my typical style guides. And they mentioned, and it was like, oh, well, it's easier for like parsing and spacing. And I think there is, like, if you ever watched that Silicon Valley movie, there was a comment in there that I think is probably based on fact, was the comment about tabs being more compressible. And so anyways, all that said, it's like easier for an AI to just like say tab and let anything else figure out what the tab means, as opposed to like, oh, in this case it's 2 spaces, in this case it's 4 spaces, and those all count as like, n number of space characters. And so I definitely can understand that argument. And so I do have a couple of projects that I started recently that I just left them tab. Every time I see it in the Git log as a tab instead of a space, it really rubs me wrong. But part of that is just like, I think, getting used to it. So, all right, so let's see what I did here. I don't even know if I want to have transparency on here, but I'm gonna leave it the way it is for right now, just because I want to see if it matches up perfectly. So, boom. So this is what I wanted to kind of highlight here, is the grid, and then what? Nope. Oh, it's going to do that anyway because it's, yeah, that's right, because it's a strategy. And so what I want to do is I want to hide them and see and just say, oh, look, they're the same. So if I do this, this isn't going to look as good if I, yeah, and I don't want you showing. So, yeah, so that grid is the same. And that's all I was confirming there, is that the grid was the same, which it should have been. After probably like an hour-long video so far, you've gotten this far, and that's all you've got. As I mentioned, chill code session. So if you want to go faster, put it in like 2-3 times speed. I think you can go 4 times speed, but then you lose audio, I think, after 3 times speed. So, all right. The next thing, just because I'm here and I don't want to have to deal with this kind of crap, like what if somebody puts in 100? Well, I think if you put in 100, if the grid's greater than this, then it's still going to do the upper colors, but I don't understand why you need that. Let me see. Grid's greater than this. Array, grid 0. Oh, okay. So that seems wrong. All right. This is probably very simple here, and it's messing with my head right now. So we've got if the grid's greater than 0, we're going to get the first element of the array, and it's NA. If it's greater than 0, grids. What was this grids? Don't even remember what I did here. Yeah, that's what I thought. So grid size is 15. So if it's greater than 0, first element's going to be, if it has a first element, then the color's green. If the grids, I don't know why that's, I need to think about that a little bit more. I don't know why the color's messing me up here, but I think we should be able to just do this in a simpler way, because this is getting this element. If it's greater than 10, yeah. You know what? I'm curious actually, because if I were to just change this to like 5, are they all going to be green? That's kind of the way I'm reading that, and that's why I think there's something messed up there. Yeah, they're all just going to be green. That's why I was like, because it's wrong. That's why it's messing with my brain. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do an even number just for easy math. So let's do 10. And then what I want to do is I want to say if, let's see, I might just figure this out later, because I don't think I want. Yeah, let's move on for right now, because I don't like this. It's going to bother me, but let's maybe get this thing done. Try to get this thing done, and then we can move on to making it prettier. So typically I sit here and just make it pretty and go as I go, and we have been laid back, but it has also been almost an hour, and I do have some other stuff that I would like to work on. Today tends to be a little bit of a volunteer day for me. So I've got a website that I'm doing a redesign on. I think I mentioned it before, called UCount. So they work to fight against human trafficking. And so they were looking for a website redesign. And so I've been helping them out with that. And it's mostly done. I just have to make it live. I actually will probably share the site with everybody here once I get that. But I just haven't got that yet. Why is... oh, I see. Okay, I probably shouldn't have done that. Okay. getting distracted. All right. For 0, 2 grids, -1, buy 1. If the price is less than the current value and number order has been placed, if close is less than the value in the array and there's no order and you have a trend filter, which I'm not doing right now. So we're going to, boom. So what we're going to do, the buy ID is here, order set, array, strategy, strength. So what's happening here is it's going to trigger this buy, right? And so buy ID, strategy, enter buy ID. And so this, I figured this would be pretty simple. So you're going to watch an hour-long video, and then the ultimate, how do we make this available in the skeleton key was super simple. But I'm thinking because this is I think actually this will be easy. I want to buy. I'm going to create a var buy signal. False. Normally, I don't use vars very much, so a var is going to persist iteration over iteration. And so if you don't do this, which I might not actually, then it's going to reset every time. And so you'll end up with the value of NA, for example. And then when you try to use that value, if you expected it to be of the value of the previous bar, it won't be that. And so one way you can address that, and I do this sometimes, is you check to see if there was a previous value. And I think I can't remember if you need to do this for the previous value or not. I have to look at. I'll have to remember how the indexing works, and if it's if there is no previous value, then you're going to set it to the value that you want, like false. Or if you want to persist the value, do buy signal, whatever the previous value was. I think this is right. It's got to be 0, right? I feel like 1's not right. So, and then you end up using, I think I spelled this wrong, signal. No, I spelled it right. So you can do something like this if you drop the var, and then you'll still get the persisted values cycle after cycle. This is normally what I do. But for now, I've seen a lot of people, and I don't remember, I can't remember when they introduced var, but in any case, I'm just going to use var for right now. I think that should work the way that I want. And then sell, signal. See my dog getting ready to look like she wants to go outside, so false, we're not selling anything right now. So the thing about using these versus how I did it before, the way I did it before is it's going to reset at the beginning of every cycle, it'll come through and reset to the value that you want. So it's either going to be the initial value or the previous value. That works well if you want to continue carrying it forward. I actually, for my case, I want it to be false every single time. And so I might not want this to actually be variable because I don't want that value to persist. I literally want it to just be false every iteration. So this is probably the way that I'm going to want to do this. And then here, what I would do, and so I'm probably going to pull up some other code so I can make sure I copy this just the way that I like it. But what I would do here is you would say plot by. So you'd say, so this is true, right? So I'm going to say by equals, by signal equals 1. And I might as well just put these at the top. Me putting these at the top is a JavaScript hoisting thing that's just kind of burned in my brain. So, and I'm re-signing this, so this one needs to be like this. What am I doing wrong? Cannot assign a value of int to type by signal variable. Oh, yeah, of course you can't. true. And then rather than writing true here, I'll probably put bi-signal in here too, but I'm not going to do that just yet. And then plot bi-signal. Bi-signal like this. If bi-signal is true, then I'm going to plot a 1. If it's false, it's going to be 0. And then the problem is you can't do this in an if loop, and that's what this is going to say. Cannot use plot in local scope, and so plots have to be out here. And that's the reason, otherwise I just would have used the true value or something like that. But so that is why I'm going to set the bi-signal to true here. Oh, and I should have just copied that. Why did I do that? And then I'm going to put this out here. So I've got the grid plots here, and then this is the strategy execution plots. So that's another thing that well, whatever. I'm not going to complain about it. So, and then I'm missing the label here. So I'm going to go, you're not going to see this on screen here, but I'm going to jump to somewhere, and I'm going to grab what I want to grab. Oh, hey, I just got a notification about Opus 4.7. I knew it came out yesterday, but it's in my IDE showing me that it popped up now. I haven't tried it out. I'm curious. I do use a lot of AI stuff. From what I've heard is it's actually Opus 4.7. I heard some people that I have less trust in how they review that stuff say that it's awesome. And then I have a couple of people that I trust in what they say that it's good at some things and terrible at other things. And so I don't think it's, I don't know if it'll be that much better than stuff I'm using to switch, but what was I going to look for? I think that's got it. What I'm looking for here, I have a way that I like to plot things when I'm going to be using it as a referenced indicator. And so I'm just looking for one of my past indicators that I've used since I've been doing this, and I'll go through the details of why I do it that way. This is looking for the right plot value. Table color, string, new, nope. Table cell, nope. That's not it. That's not it. Am I? What? That might not be the right one. Oh, there it is. Yeah, it wasn't the right one. There you go. That's why I couldn't find it. All right, I got it. All right, so this is coming from the GAN swing indicator that I wrote, because the GAN swing catalyst indicator that I wrote, which is one of the things, I used to use the one that I know Jason and Michael had put together one, and it's awesome. I hadn't really ever used it that much, but I did subscribe to it years ago when it was like $8 or something. I think the price. I think the only way you get it now is actually subscribing to their service. And so I was trying. I talked to them a little bit about trying to update their stuff, and they weren't interested in doing that because they have their own community and the way they do things, which is all good. But because of that, I wanted to be able to use the tools that I use so that I could validate GAN stuff. And that was a learning journey that I was on about learning things GAN related. And for me, I need to be able to backtest it. I can't use something I can't backtest. And so I wrote my own that exposes signals so that you can backtest this. And so it's basically very similar to theirs. I added some stuff to mine. I saw later that they added similar stuff that I have. So I think, all things being said, we've probably shared some information back and forth about what should go in the indicators. But, anyway, that's where I got this. And the reason let me go through this. The reason I do it this way, let me buy signal. Enter. I'm trying to remember. Usually I think what I've been doing is like the enter, plot, enter. Yeah, and so I'm gonna get the labels in here. Boom, boom, boom. Color, color gray. Trying to remember. Show last break. I'm just gonna make the color the same as the C lower color. Okay, so and then if this is really getting into the reason why I do it this way. So in the display, depending on when you plot things, you can actually configure it so that it's going to show up in different areas in the chart. So you'll see like all these things in here that you see. Some of these are like just nulled out values. And then you'll also see it plotted on the chart. And then if you open up the it's not the object viewer. There's like a data view. I think it's the data window is what it's called. If you look in the data window, then you can see values in there. And so depending for these particular ones, what I care about is I care about seeing it in the data window. I use that for debugging, and I care about seeing it in the status line, which is up here. And so I don't want it showing everywhere else. I don't want to see like a true or a one pop like printed on the chart. And so that's why I do things the way that I do them, is because I want to control exactly where the value is rendered. And so that's the way I do that. Style cross, you can change the styles. I'm not doing that here because I'm not plotting it anyway. Not plotting it in there. Show last. That was kind of actually an interesting issue. And then editable false, which means when you go into your property pane or your style pane, you're not going to have you can't turn this on and off. And if you want people to control that, that's fine. For this signal there, it's displayed in the data window and it's displayed up here. So I'm not allowing them to turn that off, depending on, I mean, you're seeing all this code, so you can create your own if you want. And if you want to turn it off, go put it there and turn it off. I tend to weigh on the side of like allowing people to turn these things on and off. However, if you turn this off, that also prevents you from being, it basically turns this plot off, and then you're not able to reference it in an external indicator. So because of the purpose of why I'm implementing it, I want this to always be there. I don't want somebody to turn it off, and that could just create an issue like, well, I turned this off, and they didn't know they turned it off or something, and they're like, why can't I reference it? And so it just can create some issues when you do that. So that's why I plot things pretty much always the same way when I'm creating it as something that can be referenced in a strategy, for example. Exit. I'm actually gonna call it sell because you might want to do it to the short side. So, and because of that, I'm just gonna call this buy. Yeah, some indicators it's very clear. Like this is a buy signal, and you're doing a long indicator. This one you could work at both sides. So I'm actually So I changed that to buy because you might buy or sell. And then this is gonna be upper. C upper. All right. And then, so I got the buy signal here, buy signal there. I need to add the sell signal here. And so sell signal is equal to true. And so typically, I ran it. Oh yeah. Strategy close. We're not doing anything. All right. So, I mean, I think this is it, honestly. I think it's done. But, of course, I'd want to fix up these grids. I think that just affects the plot the way, because these are all just plotting down here, the colors. It's not going to matter how much it iterates in this array. It could do that forever, up to 100,000, because arrays have a limitation. In PineScript, you can't go over 100,000. That might sound like a lot, but I have ran into issues with that, especially when you're saving a lot of history and you have a lot of historical stuff. So 100,000 in the context of programming is not that much. I want to say it's a huge limitation on their platform, but also they wrote their own language into their own stuff. And so, it's very good for what it is, but I think and I've read some of the articles of why they did this. It's more performant for the platform that they've chose and doing time series stuff, and rather than trying to like use just Python and then build time series into it. All that said, I still wish they just would have used Python or JavaScript, something else, so that you didn't have these crazy nuances. But, they also have probably I don't know how much money they make, but I bet it's $1 billion at least. So I'm sure they're a multi-billion-dollar company. So obviously they probably know better than me. Or they're very good at marketing. That's something else I know. If you're really good at marketing, it doesn't really matter how good your product is. You can just sell whatever. And if you're good at marketing, people will buy it from you. So that's a good thing. Now, obviously, if you have a good product and good marketing, that is, of course, the best way to go. But that's not always the case. So let's see. I think this is it. I saved it. It compiled. What we would need to do now is plug this into the skeleton key. And the reason I'm hesitating because I'm like, I know something's going to be wrong because I haven't looked at how to do this in the skeleton key yet. So you know what? I think because we've gone so long, and I don't want to just fiddle around with plugging this into the skeleton key. I think that'll be the big, hurrah at the end of this. And so what I'm just going to do that, and I will show you how all the values have been plugged in once I do that. If I find an error or something like that, then I'll fix it. I am going to spend some time. I'm going to fix this part, but it's been over an hour of me just doing some, I said 50 lines of code. I mean, if you condense this, it's probably like 30, but without all the white space and stuff. But at the end of the day, it was pretty close to 50 lines of code, and it took me over an hour. So close to an hour and a half. I think that's what I said. So obviously chill coding session. So the code is here. You can write it all out yourself. Once I have this, I don't know that if this will get through publishing it as a public script, because, they're pretty harsh on not just publishing stuff that does it that isn't new or unique. And so I don't know how new or unique this is going to be. And so I'm going to do, if I can't publish it like that, then I'll publish it as private but open, meaning that you'll need the link for it. But if you find the link, then you'll have the code, and I will put that, maybe not in the description of this channel, because I'll probably forget to come and update it. But if I do remember, I'll make sure it's updated in this channel, or in the description of this video. And either way, in the next video, which I will plan to have out early next week, and that will be me plugging in the skeleton key. We can just see how it worked and see if it lined up. I do expect it to be a decent strategy, which is why I want to spend the time doing this. But we'll also see if how well it performed compared to the other one, where I knew the other one had like some capital management issues, which is what made me, why I didn't want to deal with it in the current state that it was in. And I also didn't want to try and just fix it in the current state that it is in, because I know you can control all the capital management stuff in the property pane, and I just want to go to doing that because that's the way it's intended to be done in TradingView anyways. So I didn't want to fight the platform on that. So that'll be it. So looking forward to getting it plugged into the skeleton key. I will have a link to this if it's not published as open source, or either way, I'll have a link to this. If not in this video, it will be in the next video. So, subscribe, all that stuff, if you want to stay up to date on catching that. And let me know. I'd really appreciate it if just one or two people threw me a comment and said, hey, this is useful, this isn't useful. Or, dang, man, you suck. It took you that long to write all that code. I mean, geez Louise, what are we waiting for? Either way, I really would appreciate some feedback on that, because I think this is the type of content that people, that I could offer that a lot of other people might not be able to offer, simply because I do know how to write code. And so, and we'll have that out. So, appreciate the comments if you got some comments, and we will catch you on the next one. Peace, Quants.